Welcome to Impact Farming, where we introduce you to the people and ideas that will have a massive impact on your farming operation. Brought to you by Farm Marketer. Sit down, start the engine, and let's roll with today's show.
Hello, everyone. Tracy here. Welcome back to another episode. I am so thankful to have you joining me for another fantastic conversation. But before we dive right in, a quick word from this week's sponsor.
Soil health is under pressure, but real solutions start below the surface. Black Earth offers a full suite of humic solutions, from high-purity granules to powder, liquid, and soluble formulations, all powered by pure Humulite. Formulated for performance, backed by consistency, trusted by growers worldwide from one of the world's rarest reserves. Grow stronger with the power of Black Earth Humulite. Learn more from Mind to Market at blackearth.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Impact Farming Show. Today, I have a returning guest, Darin Nooren. How are you?
Good. How are you today?
Good. I'm excited to have you back on the show, and we're going to be talking about fair and equal. Again, we chatted about that a little bit before, and we're going to talk about how to not make it work and how we can actually make this work for farm families. I know both you and I share the same mission. You've seen family farms destroyed. We've seen neighbor farms destroyed. Everybody in the audience has seen it. Hopefully they're not going through it. We're both here to serve the audience and make sure that we can take care of all interested parties when it comes to succession planning. So welcome back. Are you excited?
Thanks for having me. Yes, always.
Good. I'm excited to have you back. So can you quickly tell our audience about who you are, what you do, your profession, and then we'll actually dive in and we'll chat succession planning.
So Darin Nooren, I grew up on a small dairy farm in Southern Ontario. Opa did really well, so I was following him around since I was 2 or 3 years old. Oma finally had to go into the barn for the first time in her life, I think, to go find me. But grew up with some great mentors up the road, worked for them right from a kid till I graduated business school. And pretty much my whole mission has been to prevent successful farm operations from being divided up 3 or 4 ways and sold off for basically a lack of planning and a lack of capital, because mom and dad had everything all in one basket, being farmland or cows and quota or grain elevators, whatever it may be. But it's hard to divide that up. And in today's world, the non-farming kids they very much want an even share of that's hard to word very, very politely.
I'm laughing in my head. I'm like, how is he going to word this?
I know. No barn talk. No barn talks.
Yes, yes.
But yeah, everybody's sitting there a month after the funeral waiting for the will to be read and expecting a 20% or 1/3 or whatever the share may be. And a farm just can't afford to refinance and continue on. Yeah. When you're taking that much capital out of the operation, it usually took 100 years or more to get to a comfortable place.
Yeah.
So it happened on both sides of my family. So I've lived it. I've lived it. I've driven down the highway on both sides of the road, one family, and the other direction on the same highway, both sides of the road, the other side of the family. So, and then went to Alberta 4 years ago and started farming by myself too. So I've lived all that part too.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about your company and then what you do for a living as well before we dive in?
So primarily, it's life insurance based, with a lot of tax planning and corporate structure, but nobody wants to pay for life insurance because everybody wants to go buy another combine or 3 more quarters up the road or whatever it may be. So probably 12 years ago, we started financing the premium just like you would finance a farm. Just borrow it from the financial institution or the bank and have the asset basically pay for itself. So that takes a lot of the cash flow requirements off of the farm so that you can plan for 30 or 40 years later without it tying up your ability to achieve your goals today and in the current times.
I like it.
So
Go ahead.
that was definitely a game changer for Canadian agriculture with the financial institutions providing us that option.
Okay. So you and I both farm, and I like just saying it how it is. I assume most of us in the audience, we don't like talking about insurance. We don't like talking about wills or estates. Let's just name it. I think when we name something that's uncomfortable, it's easier to go, okay, deep breath, let's just watch, right? And learn. Because here's the thing, and you and I have chatted about this, and this is what I'm starting to see going back to we're similar ages, I'm sure. Going back to my grandparents' farm in those days, the farm would get handed down to the oldest boy of the family. And you know what? Most of the kids in that age, they went to the city because they had good careers. Nobody cared about the farm, the farmland for the most part. If they were upset, they were upset. Family broke apart. But the farm got passed down, got passed down. But here is now, and the way I'm saying it, the pendulum is swinging so hard just because of where we're at as a society and the value of land that handing it down to the first son is no longer acceptable. I'm not going to say that's not a good thing that we're not doing that. I see all sides of it, but here we're going way over here and we have to do fair and equal because which parent doesn't love their kid fair and equal, right? Like it's just not
Right.
acceptable anymore. But here is the danger. Back then, the farms got passed down. Now, if we're doing fair and equal, and I'm going to ask you, and we're going to go rapid fire through all the ways that we can fair and equal, but we're going so far over this way, we're going to fair and equal the farm to death. When we split up, let's say the pie is just right for one person to live and make a living and support the farm. Now we're saying, okay, let's share the pie with three other siblings. Again, I'm not saying that's not fair, but if us as farm founders, people in the audience that care about the farming industry, we want farms to continue on, we need other options. And that is where you will come in and say, hey, insurance is how we can actually make this work, right?
Yeah, you need the access to capital to without having to go borrow 60% loan to value or selling farms or anything like that because you can't cut a successful enterprise in four pieces every 25 years and expect it to live on and be enjoyable and a comfortable lifestyle and still have enough initiative to keep it going. And there's a lot of other inefficiencies too. If you have $1 million farm and you've already used your capital gains exemption up and you sell that farm, you're not getting $1 million because you probably bought that farm for $100,000 30 years ago or something like that. And then the tax man's going to come take their piece too before you even take the net proceeds and divide it up. So if you can use the life insurance and create a new asset in a holding company that runs alongside the operating company, and because you're financing it, you're literally creating it based on the contract you have with the insurance company. So you have the ability and a guaranteed payout one day to pay out the non-farming children. And I would argue that while you're doing all that, you should plan on paying off all the debt of the farm each and every generation. Because debt, especially where we are today in agriculture, in our global markets, it's not going to be a huge surplus at the end of the year to really crunch down on debt likely this year.
Yeah. Okay, before we go deep into insurance, that's a great intro to it. I want to go over the different ways that farms are sitting here going, how do we do fair and equal? And just really rapid fire and get you to go, well, no, that doesn't work because a lot of people are be like, okay, number one, I'm going to just leave it all to the first farm or the farm kid, doesn't matter their age or gender. Speak to that.
Well, usually it's everything. If I pass away, goes to my wife, and then my wife's will says when she's gone, everything goes equally to the kids.
Yeah.
Well, that's first of all, it's very vague. So it could be very inefficiently interpreted and divided up. And to do that, you can't just divide up an ongoing farm. There's lots of pieces to the puzzle that you need to keep intact to still have a viable farm. So that's when you see 50 for sale signs in the county go up and taxes being paid, and then kids getting their equal share and taking that wealth out of the rural community and going to town. And that once that family goes back to the middle class, not that that's a bad thing, but it takes a lot of capital to start farming again.
Yeah.
So if one of those grandkids even was 12 years old and did want to farm, there's no way you're going to get that. I guess what I'm trying to say is the opportunity is lost.
Yeah.
You can go farm in a different province, you can go farm in a different county. It's the lost opportunity for the bloodline that is that's probably the most emotional part of it.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so that's a bit about fair and equal. So also, I know we've chatted and a few people have said this, you cannot actually technically, which is insane. I mean, on both sides, you can't technically leave. Okay, you can technically, let's say I have 4 children and I want to do it the good old fashioned way and leave the farm I want to leave everything to one kid or give these guys a little bit, whatever it is. The children that got shorted can actually sue, right?
For sure in Ontario and BC, and I'm not giving law advice because
Okay.
I'm not a lawyer,
Disclaimer, yeah.
but for sure in Ontario and BC, that if it goes to court, it'll almost be divided up completely equal by the time the courts make their decision. And again, they're not getting together at Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter. I try to leave the emotion out as much as I possibly can, but that is a big thing long term in family. Like I met uncles and cousins at my grandfather's funeral. I was 23 years old. I never met them before, and it's not like they lived hours away. And that was all over fighting over farmland. So
Yeah, isn't that the truth? Okay, so we know that's not an option. You divide it equally. Well, we just know how that goes. If the farm needed all the assets and the farming kid only gets his quarter of the assets, well, he's going to farm that or it's just all going to get sold. So there goes that. So then the other thing that people say, and I want your thoughts on this, is very often, if it's not already in a corporation, farm founders will put it in a corporation and then handle it that way, right?
Yeah, it's going to be more efficient to pay down the principal of the debt inside of a corporation. And there's some other benefits to it as well. But for the estate planning, it makes it a lot easier to freeze the value of the estate with preferred shares.
Okay.
And then you can issue new common shares to the farming children so that the growth is increasing with them doing the extra initiative to grow the farm and make the farm more efficient. You need to be able to quantify it. You can't just in your estate planning say, I want everything divided up 4 ways. Because what's the price of farmland going to be in 35 years? You have no idea if it's going to keep doubling every 10 years or go stagnant or be 5% less than it is today. I highly doubt it because our government prints enough money that it keeps inflating the value of almost all assets. But for the planning, if you can quantify, say each non-farming kid's going to get 20 million, right? That's a number. Preferred shares with an option to redeem them with the proceeds of the life insurance back to the corporation within 90 days, 120 days, whatever your lawyer and accountant wants to write up in the agreement. Then at least you can plan on that. You can't plan on numbers you don't know 35 years from now, and you don't know when the key people in the scenario are going to pass away either. There could be a horrible accident tomorrow, or they could live another 45 years. You have no idea. That's why the insurance is the most efficient, guaranteed way to provide the capital to keep the farm going and buy out the non-participating children and pay off the debt.
Yeah. I'm going to have to, sorry, jumping in there quick. I'm going to do an episode one day on corporations and kind of walk through that with somebody to get all the pros and cons of that, because that's one of the ways I think a lot of people are leaning for it to go, right? Because it's, I think, the simpler solution. The farm kid's in there. Maybe he has the decision making. The other ones are more silent, but they all get their shares. But there's also cons to that as well, right? The
Right.
non-farming kids are like, all my inheritance is tied up. This farm doesn't generate huge profit. Why am I in here? Right? I think that can go bad that way, couldn't it?
Right, but at least with the insurance and the estate freeze, you're getting bought out when your parents are gone, when you would have received your inheritance otherwise in most cases, right? If you put it all in a trust and then you want to control it from the grave for the next 21 years and you left it in 4 pieces in trust as your children as the beneficiaries, that's when there is quite a bit of resentment, because you can put in that trust that my farming son has the option that he can rent this for the next 30 years or whatever, and rent's going to pay 1% rate of return, 2% rate of return, and you have millions of dollars tied up in that trust that you're a beneficiary of. Well, you can't go buy your cottage, you can't pay off your house, you can't retire. It's just locked in there for the next 21 years, and that is not the way to do it. I've experienced that way too. One side of the family did it that way, and it ends up all being sold anyway.
Okay. And I'm not the expert here, and I'm sure the people that encourage that way are going to say, but here's the benefits. We're having you here to present the pros and cons, and then also speak to insurance as, in your mind, the better option to make everybody happy. So why don't we go there? We kind of chatted about the different ways it can go, pros and cons. Now tell me, and again, one other quick way, usually people would say, well, farm founders, if you have non-farming assets, you give those to the non-farming children. Let's be realistic. A lot of farmers that I know, everything's invested in the farm. There's no non-farming assets unless you get a townhouse, but most of the time we're just buying more land, right? So that's
Right.
also not even a valid argument. So I just I had that as a note too to talk about. Okay, so you work with farmers on insurance, and I know you are a huge fan of saying that this is the best way to make all 3 parties happy. If you look at trying to get the farm going, we need the farm founders that get money for retirement. They're happy, taken care of. We need the farm kid to have the farm intact, what he needs or she needs to be able to continue that farm up. We don't want it divvied up. Then we have the non-farming children. They need to be taken care of. They need their inheritance now. So very high level, very simply, can you explain how insurance takes care of all 3 parties like no other option really can?
So for the parents, when they're in the retired years and the next generation is growing the farm and operating the farm, is they know that the insurance on them contractually is going to guaranteed go to their non-farming kids,
Okay.
with the remainder going to the corporation, hopefully back to pay off the debt, because I think that is very important. But it takes all the stress off of them. Like, how are we going to do this? What's going to happen after I'm gone? I know there's going to be 20 million for each kid, guaranteed, paid by the insurance company. And then for the farming kid who is growing the farm and working 120 hours a week, they know that they're going to be able to afford to take that farm over and keep it intact. And then for the non-farming kids, they know that the capital is going to be there, structured in an efficient manner, that they're going to receive their fair portion of the estate. So it calms everybody down. Like 6 months after everything's in place, they're smiling and they're joking around. It's not just a constant anxiety of, well, who's going to say it? Because none of us know what's going on. If something happens to mom and dad tomorrow, like, none of us know what to do because there's nothing set up.
I could see that. And I think the worst part is just the lack of clarity for everybody, right? And I think farm founders are scared. They don't know how to handle it. They don't know the options. The farm kid's scared because they've invested so much of their time and they don't know what's happening, and that's their livelihood. And then the non-farming children are like, well, let's be fair here, right? What's happening to us? We know Johnny or Sally farms, but what about us, right?
Right,
Okay.
right. So as soon as, especially the farm founders, as soon as they start to realize that there are some options to look at, they're leaning in at the kitchen table or the boardroom table and they're listening. The first 5 minutes when you go there, they're like, who are you? And this is about insurance. I don't like insurance. But
Yeah.
once you get to, there is a reason for this, and it's to keep everything intact and to keep your family intact as well, then the conversation usually goes much, much better because this is something that they're all worried about.
Yeah.
The 20-year-old grandkids are worried about it. The 45-year-olds that are working like crazy are worried about it. And mom and dad at 70 are worried about it because you've taken something from usually their parents, and now it's worth 10 times more, 20 times more. It's a
Yeah.
big asset to try to divide.
Yeah. So really that, and I'm going to 101 here because I'm not an expert at insurance and I'm learning along with our audience here. So, okay, we know, let me ask this and let me hear your answer. So we know the farm kid's going to be, he's going to have a viable farm now because the farm founders have taken care of non-farming children with life insurance. Once they die, it goes to those children. They're happy, the farm stays intact. That is the kids' inheritance, the farm kids' inheritance. Is there a part in there? Um, no, I'm gonna finish my question, but you're gonna go no, Tracy, not the same conversation, but you can tell me in your own words. How do we get farm founders money to retire before they die? Is that done through insurance or is that more the farm paying them?
You can use the insurance because the cash value grows way faster
Okay.
than the loan against it when we do finance it. So you can access that because you can borrow 100% of the cash value at any time. So you could use that as part of what you would pay mom and dad to live during retirement. Also, though, if you haven't used your capital gains exemption yet in your life, if you've never sold farmland and used that up, you might as well take $2.5 million out of the farm if or when you can, and maybe diversify a bit, maybe invest it in something with an investment advisor that's relatively boring, just so that you have your nest egg and peace of mind and you're not worried about the price of grain isn't very good and you're wondering why your kids and grandkids are still out clearing land and spending $100,000 on extra diesel fuel when canola is $13 and oats are $4 or corn's 550, I think. I don't think people are making money at 550 on corn. It's too expensive to grow.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So the cash value you can take against the policy is part of
Yeah,
your
it's a huge asset. Like I have an example beside me, and at age 92, the cash value of this example is $360 million. Like
wow.
it grows and grows and grows because contractually the death benefit equals the the cash value equals the death benefit at age 100. So, and it's tax free. That's the other thing we haven't talked about yet.
Go ahead.
Or we touched on it, but the fact that that's tax free is a big piece of it because if you can go borrow 40 or $50 million to buy your non-farming siblings out. If you have a big enough land base and you qualify for it, and that is tax free, but then you're paying all that principal back with after-tax dollars plus interest. So that 50 million bucks might cost you 90 million by the time you pay it back.
Mm,
Where this is you're going to buy it for pennies on the dollar, and in most cases, it's not taking any cost out of the operating company to have it growing alongside. It's the cheapest, it's by far the cheapest way of doing it. By far. I've looked at every other way possible. There's there's no other way to come up with that large of a check tax free to buy out your non-farming siblings. And I know I might sound repetitive on that, but just talking about this, you think about I've been from Ottawa to Dawson Creek, I don't know how many times and everywhere in between. And the amount of mini empires where there's 50 for sale signs, 100 for sale signs, and it's just because no planning.
Mm,
And those people should have been buying 10 more quarters that following year, not selling 80% of them.
yeah. Well, that's exactly it. We're just doing what we know, which is our knowledge is limited in these areas, right? Because
Right.
who farms that essentially knows the legal end, the accounting end, and insurance as well, right?
Right. So our team, we have a banker that does nothing but the insurance. We have another banker that does nothing but land. We have another banker that does helps out farms if they're in a more difficult scenario or if they want to expand aggressively. Um, one's an accountant. We have a whole team. Well, there's two accountants. There's another one back in Ontario that if somebody needed to, they're probably the most aggressive accounting firm when it comes to succession planning. Like it's all business. Let's get this on paper because our number one goal is to keep this farm around 50 years from now and growing. Like we're not going backwards here. So
Yeah. Okay. So I am trying to figure out the best question to ask you at this point. I'm This is not my wheelhouse. So essentially, if there's farm founders, it's sitting down with an individual like you and saying, here's our situation. There's 4 kids, 1 farms. We want the farm to go to this individual. We want these kids to get some inheritance. How do we do this? And then we also want to retire and buy a house in town so we can live there.
right.
It's just sitting down. I mean, that's the frustrating part sometimes with these episodes, Darin. I find it's like, give me black and white, give me answers. But everybody's farming operation is so different. Like you said, 100 million. I mean, there are individuals that might say, okay, farm kid gets this. And if I have 1 million to divvy up against to the other kids, we're good, right? We're all on all different spectrums when it comes to the size of our operation and our cash, right?
Right. Right. And I use the 100 million as an example just because then it's easily a direct percentage.
Okay.
Right. So if you have a $10 million farm or $150 million farm and everything in between, the problems are almost always the same. You can change the last names and you can change the numbers on the paper. It's almost always the same. The non-farming children, the debt, because parents have lived with a crazy amount of debt for the last 40 years. And often they don't want their next generation to have to carry on farming that way. And taxation. Our country is very reliant on taxing wealthy people. So farms can be passed down from generation to generation, but if you were thinking about ever selling out to a neighbor or something like that, you need to be planning for that ideally years ahead of time because that's going to be a big bill because the actual cost base on a lot of these farms is very, very small. There's cost bases on farms that are 5,000, 10,000, 40,000, and those farms are millions of dollars now if
Hmm.
they've been in the family for 70 or 90 years, right?
Okay. So this is our second time talking about it. I haven't dipped my toe too much into insurance. It actually seems like a no-brainer when you're thinking about it. It's like, why wouldn't we have life insurance, right?
Pretty
I'm
much.
not trying to sell your product for you, Darin, but I'm like,
No,
wait a minute, this
no,
kind of
I
seems
know.
like common sense.
It very much is. I can't think of a single scenario when you have an enterprising family, especially in agriculture. There's other enterprises that you can afford to buy your brother out. If you had a big trucking company and you're successful, you can probably borrow 10 million bucks and pay it off in 6 years, and everything's good. It's not like that with a farm. But yeah, if you can finance the premium and you structure it properly, then it just comes down to that's our job is to sell your case to the insurance companies to provide you with enough coverage. what it really comes down to is capacity. So basically net worth, because it's scaled basically off net worth slash income, the combination of the two, and the insurability. Like you can't be 75 years old and you just got out of the hospital because you had a heart attack or a little stroke and then expect to
Mm.
settle this up within the next 2 weeks because now you're worried about it. It's all about insurability. A lot more people than you think are declined for life insurance.
Okay.
Like it's not just give some blood and the nurse come out and you're automatically guaranteed. So having said that, it's almost always best get it when you're 20 years old, 22 years old, 25, when you're super healthy before time has anything to change your medical scenario. And then you would just add on to that. But you can even just buy a big term policy because you can always convert it to whole life for later on. Why term in the beginning is maybe it's just so cheap just to maintain insurability. But every 10 years or 20 years, it gets so much more expensive that eventually by the time you're in your 50s, 60s, you're not going to want it because it's going to be a huge expense every year that like enough that you could go buy a quarter of land. So you're just going to give up on it. But you can guaranteed convert it into a finance plan, put it in the holding company, and make sure everything is in a contract as far as how the shares are going to be divvied up and how they're going to be redeemed. Because you also don't want a large check from the insurance company going to the holding company and the farm kid keeps absolutely everything and then the non-farming kids didn't get their promised
Mm.
share of it, right? Like this is you have a lawyer draw it up, you have an accountant look at it, and our team works with your accountants and lawyers to make sure everybody's on the same page for implementing it the best possible scenario for the farm. We're basically working for the farm and then keeping everybody happy as we can along the way.
Well, and that's kind of my train of thought and why I'm digging into this and doing the uncomfortable work. Like, I don't necessarily love having conversations about stuff I don't know. Sometimes it's vulnerable, right? So I'm sitting here asking the questions, but honest to goodness, if we don't want all the privately owned family farms to flip over to the big holding companies, I'm not even going to name names because then people get all weirded out. But if we actually want to keep a family farm going, we need to figure this out. And Darin, you're going to go this as common sense, Tracy, and I'm going to go this as common sense, Tracy. But thinking about it, like you really can't afford, unless your farm is decently small, you can't afford to buy your siblings out. Because
You
you
can't
look
hard
at,
math.
no, you look at it, I'm not even saying expensive land, but correct me if I'm wrong here, and here's some vulnerable conversations, but I know enough that businesses don't have 50% profit. Like, I mean, software companies, and they probably have venture capital money, so that's a different conversation, but businesses don't have 50% profit where they're like, oh, okay, now we had all this extra money. So mom and dad pass away. I want to buy the farm. I can take 30% of that and get a loan. And I know where else you'll go with that. But we don't have the room to add in that payment to buy siblings out. You really don't.
So some of them are very, very efficient and have a very healthy rate of return, but all it does is go make the farm bigger.
Mm,
It's very rare that they take it out and diversify into a stock and bond portfolio or buy an apartment building in town or put it in whatever else, mortgages, GICs, anything that's non-farm related that you could diversify with. Usually it's just pay down debt, buy more land, pay down debt, build more bins,
right.
buy buy an eighth combine or a third combine, whatever it may be, right?
Yeah. You know, one further to that, because I know those numbers for Main Street businesses. And I mean, most businesses, if you have a 15 to 20% profit,
You're
there's
killing
not, you can't borrow on that. That's why they often say for people to go and buy a small business for the price you're going to pay for, like, say, the convenience store, the price you're going to pay for the convenience store. your financing period's so short, that loan's so big, the income on those small businesses, and divvy this over, like take this over to farms. I'm talking out loud here. I'm trying to figure it out. You just don't, by the time you put that big loan payment in there to pay out your siblings, you don't have the room. That, and here's one other thing. So let's say on a good year, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe there's farms out there at 40% profit, but mainstream businesses don't typically run at that from what I researched. But here's the thing. Let's say you can afford, Darin, and I'm going on a rabbit trail here because I think it's kind of important for farmers to think this through. But let's say you can afford to buy your siblings out and they don't want to touch insurance. That's on good years. But if we say farms have 2 good years, 2 really good years, 2 really bad years, and everything in between is breaking even, wait a minute. Are we setting up our kids for failure? If, let's say, you're in a high time and you're like, okay, buy your siblings out, 5 years down the road, you're just breaking even. And what? Like,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm just working this through out loud and
Yeah.
supporting your case,
If you
right?
came out of 2022 when everybody had a good year and you committed a plan that you're going to pay your siblings $1 million a year for the next 25 years,
Yes, there you
and
go.
then maybe in 23 you could,
Yeah,
24 you probably it was tight, and then this year 25 you're going to wish you never agreed to that because it's big time cutting in.
yeah. Okay,
You just can't cash flow it.
yeah. Thank you for letting me walk through this because I think these are the conversations and thoughts people have to have too. And I know there's a big farm founder audience in our audience because I look at the age demographic and they're probably sitting here going, well, I should do this. I should do this. And I'm sitting here trying to work this through. I think this is a good, vulnerable conversation for farm founders to be hearing, right? It's like, oh, wait a minute. Here's another thought, right? Thanks for
Right.
that rabbit trail. So let's get us back on track here. So I imagine we don't think about this because maybe we just don't think about it and we're so busy farming and we have all these assets and then we're working on that. Also, let's say the other obvious, I don't want to pay for insurance, right? That would be the other one. It's like, wait a minute, we're just breaking even. I don't want to put my insurance premiums onto the farm. That would be the next big objection, wouldn't it? I don't want one more
100%.
cost. Let's be real.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, we have to buy the 3 more quarters up the road because Mrs. Smith just moved to town to the
Yes.
lodge. So
There
we
you
have
go.
to buy them. Been driving by them for 40 years. Have to buy them.
And we don't have money unless it's for more land.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah.
Every time they seem to figure that part out very quickly.
Yeah.
And I'm just as guilty at that. But yeah, that's why we started financing it. Use the cash value and the equity in the policy. Finance 80% minimum, and in most cases, I would say just finance all of it. The insurance is going to pay out, it's going to pay off the loan. We can even in most cases capitalize the interest against the cash value. So now your cash flow net nil per year to buy 5 million of insurance, 100 million of insurance, if everything is structured perfect, which that's why we have pretty heavy hitters and experts in their fields as part of our team.
Okay, and now I'm going to make you do English 101 because you're saying cash value. That's all familiar with you and what you do every day. So I'm going to be vulnerable again and say how I think this works, and then you can correct me because also premiums, but the fear, like I can imagine, like I like to be smart. I like to be an expert. It is scary inviting somebody you don't know into your operation. It's vulnerable when you don't know and you're like, can you explain that again? We avoid situations that make us uncomfortable. So I'm going to be uncomfortable on behalf of everybody in the audience so that we can work through this. So here's what I think after having a few of these conversations. I buy a policy. I'm going to say 1 million. That's what I want. Let's go with that. You're going to set me up with a policy for that amount. And I'm going to pay premiums. Okay. So then with this and we can go to the financing part after, but I have to pay premiums for this insurance policy that's going to give me a death benefit when I die. The death benefit's going to be $1 million. That can be, we can say how we want that to be divvied up, but that takes care of whatever we want it to take care of. But here, where I want you to explain is I'm paying that money and you're saying cash value. So essentially, what the way I look at it, correct me, is let's say I put X many dollars a year into my policy. That kind of builds up a value, right? And then I can borrow against that value.
Right. So for round numbers, call it, say your starting death benefit's $1 million for your example.
Okay.
Say your deposit's going to be $100,000 a year,
Okay.
right? Just as a round number.
Yeah.
The cash value is probably $84,000 year one. So you cancel it in year one, you get $84,000 back. That cash value keeps growing, right? As equity, but so does your death benefit because you're young, especially for insurance. Anything under 60 is pretty young for insurance. The death benefit would probably be 5 or 6 million by the time you were going to the lodge, right?
Yeah.
And the cash value would be 5 million. So that contractual value inside the cash value, the institutions and the banks, they'll loan against that all day. It's like lending against a GIC to them because it's a contract with a multi-billion-dollar insurance company. They know that if they had to, if your farm completely collapsed or if you wanted to sell it all and for some reason you didn't meet any covenants, that equity is in there to pay off that loan at any time. They can call on that and it's just cash on cash lending.
Okay, that makes sense. Can I repeat?
Right? You can't cancel the policy, $5 million cash payout to pay off, say, a $3 million loan. It's easy. They're not waiting for farm debt mediation for 6 months. They're not waiting for you to sell a farm or to sell cattle or anything like that to come up with cash. It's super, super simple for them.
So you just use your insurance policy to pay your insurance policy fee. And then in the end, that just comes off your death benefit, right?
Right. So the death benefit in that example, when you pass away, would pay out $6 million net, pay off a $3 million loan because the interest has been capitalized and everything. And then there's still $3 million tax-free left to your state or your holding company or trust, whatever it may be, wherever your team structured it for you. And then that would take care of debt or non-farming children or whatever you may be. If you have an only child and they're farming, they can do whatever they want with it. They can go buy the neighbors out or upgrade their fleet of equipment. It's just cash sitting in an account.
Okay, one more, Tracy 101. So the policy gets paid, the fees by the fee. That's where you say it's finance. So now I have this policy, it's being paid for by itself. And then at the end, you just said 6 million. I thought I was getting 1 million. Can I clarify that?
Yeah, right. Because it started day one. If something happened to you, it would pay out 1 million.
Okay.
But because you're putting $100,000 a year in it for say 15 years.
Yeah.
And there's also a dividend on the cash value that's growing. So it internally inside the policy, it's buying more cash value, buying more death benefits. So it gets ramping up. And by the time you were a 90-year-old woman, the death benefit would be probably $6 million with a cash value of $5 million. The cash value is guaranteed in the contract to equal the death benefit at age 100.
Okay.
Guaranteed, regardless of what the stock market does, the bond market, interest rates, all of those wonderful things that we need to work with daily.
Okay, I get it. I like having the uncomfortable conversations on behalf of my audience because had I left it, I vaguely know where it works. I've had a few of these conversations, but I think it's important. And then one more here. Somebody in the audience is going, well, that seems too good to be true. How does that get to finance itself? But the insurance policy is a policy and they know it's worth $1 million right at the moment that you buy it. So it's like getting a loan and it's security, right? Oh, is that the right word? The policy is essentially security for you borrowing your policy
It
fee.
is. It's collateralized to the institution.
Okay. And they know
Yeah.
eventually they can get that money, or you're going to die and they can get that money.
Right. Right. Or cancel the policy and they have the cash value. So it's it's guaranteed lending for them, essentially guaranteed by the strength of the multi-billion-dollar life insurance companies that there's really only four in Canada that work for this. Some are better than others, just like everything else. It's the lending that really makes it work efficiently because some lenders will ask for personal guarantees and corporate guarantees, and we're going to take your antique car in the garage and your black lab as collateral, like everything. Where other ones, there's no personal guarantees, no corporate guarantees. And if you wanted to go buy more land, it's not going to inhibit this loan against your insurance policy is not going to prevent you from buying more land or upgrading your equipment, anything like that, which is huge because I myself, I don't want that to slow down my
Right.
growth. If I want to and can go buy another farm, you kind of have to jump on it and get the deal done because if somebody else buys it, you're going to be driving by it the next 40 years and wish you had of. So
Mm.
you can plan for the future without it taking the opportunity cost out of today, basically. And it's designed that way on purpose because of my farming background, because I think very, very closely to how all my clients are farmers, all of them. They might be diversified in something else, but they all have the farming mentality. And if they are diversified, their number one goal with starting their business was so that one day they could farm.
Okay. This makes sense. And of course, the policy, or just like any insurance policy, how big your operation is, what you want at the end, and then that'll dictate your premiums. Because some people will be like, you know what, we're a small farm. I just want something else for my kids, right? But I like what you're saying, but I don't need a policy that big. That's just sitting down with you guys, right? And there's other ones out there
100%.
so big that they're like, okay, now we're talking. Like I want, like these are our numbers. So we know there's farms from this size to this size. So, okay, I'm happy I went through that. I think I asked all the questions that farmers would want. And then I want to actually roll into some other things that you wanted to talk about where insurance comes in handy. And I think insurance on farming partners, unless you want to touch on the succession end at all, let's go to having insurance on your farming partner.
Right. If you and I are farming together, example, and something happens to me and we have a ton of debt and you need to buy my spouse out, then insurance is by far the only way you're going to do it. By far. You're not going to go borrow 90% of the value of your company, leverage it right up. It's just impossible. So you just want 2 weeks after I'm gone, present a birth or a death certificate, sorry, and you get a big check for 5, 10, 20, 100, whatever you need. You just buy my spouse out, pay off a bunch of debt, and keep on working. And that there is a lot of people farming with in-laws across Canada because of that. You can't afford to buy them out, right? You're in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, you're in growth mode. That's when you're like 50% loan to value, buy everything you possibly can, right? And something happens, you just don't have the liquidity or the access to capital to buy them out. So now you have a business partner that wasn't your intended business partner for the next 30 years. And it can get challenging. I'm sure it goes good sometimes, but
Wow. Grief and death and family, let's be real. Okay, so an example, let's say Anthony, my husband, was farming with his brother. Oh, I don't even want to say the words Anthony passing away. I don't even want to talk about that. But let's say one of them, flip it to the imaginary brother. They have to buy out the farming partner's wife, husband, whatever it is. And that goes right back to what we said before. There isn't enough money in there. I'm just going to do an easy number again, $1 million farm. That's all our farm's worth, like equipment, everything. They'd be happy with $500,000. So now the surviving farming partner has to go and get that loan for $500,000 to buy out the spouse of the farming partner that just died. We're back to square one that we were talking about with the non-farming children. I can't afford to get a $500,000 loan on how our business runs, right?
Right. It's back to what is the cheapest, most efficient way of coming up with a large amount of capital. And that's all it is.
Okay.
Is when an important person in your operation passes, then there's usually a massive need for capital, whether it's debt or business partners or siblings. It's always the same things. You change the numbers and the last names, and it's the issues are very, very similar.
And I'm going to ask one more question that's coming up. So this becomes a farm cost, right? Well, unless we're financing it, but essentially, is it deductible, like as a farm cost?
Yeah, if you make the deposit and then borrow the money back a couple weeks later, it is a tax deduction.
Okay.
If it's financed directly, it is not a deduction, but you have the option of which way you want to go with that, and that's all in discussions with the team that's putting it all together. Is some farms need deductions and some, depending on what stage you're at, do not need deductions. So
Okay. I was just kind of thinking that out loud. It's like, hey, this is a cost of doing business, is kind of what I was getting to in my brain.
Yeah, you can deduct parts of it and still have access to the capital. So you can have very significant tax deductions if you are in a position where that is part of the planning you're looking for, is you're paying too much income tax. This can definitely help mitigate at least part of that.
Okay. The next one that you wanted to touch on is insurance for debt management and repayment, essentially as a blessing to pay off farm debt so we don't continue to pass it on, right?
Yes. It doesn't matter what stage you're at or the size of operation you have, the most efficient way of paying off debt is with life insurance. We're all going to pass one day anyway, so just have life insurance on every generation, so that there is a chunk of money there one day that is earmarked debt repayment. Let's keep this farm strong and viable for the next generation, because being maxed out in debt all the time is not fun. It's not efficient, and we're trying to not entice, but incentivize the future generations to stay on the farm and keep the legacy going.
Mm-hmm.
Our great-great-grandfathers did not leave the farm, live off nothing their entire life to give their farm to their oldest son for it to be sold off, because lots of generations would have sold it off prior if they didn't think that there was a hope and a dream going forward to keep it around for 100 years, 200 years, and hopefully onward and upward from there.
Interesting.
Right?
Sorry.
It's all about lifestyle and legacy farming. There are way easier jobs to go do where you can still afford a cottage and a boat and nice vehicles in your driveway. There's way easier ways to do that, especially in Alberta. There's lots of big fancy jacked up trucks pulling RV trailers and boats, because the guys can, instead of making 50 grand a year working for mom and dad on the farm, they can go to the oil patch and make 180, 220 and live the lifestyle that some people dream of. I'd rather farm, but
Well, and you don't have millions of dollars of debt either. You show, I mean, pros and cons of each, right? But okay, that makes sense. And you know what? I'm liking this conversation. Myself as a person, a business person, a farmer, I'm in a different place. I'm getting this more. And I was actually having a conversation about the debt load. It's very relevant for where we're at in farming, but the debt load from generation to generation, like, previous people have farmed similar land to us with a fraction of the debt. And then you see those memes where they're getting paid. I mean, we're beef and we make more off our beef now, but our costs are high. And it's like, wait a minute, how does this make sense? And it goes back to that we shouldn't be rebuying the same land. Here nor there, I'm going to loop this together. If we had a kid, and we were going to give them the farm, a blessing, well, not sell them, whatever. A blessing would be, here's a death policy on us. It gives you 500,000, $1 million. Take that and put it on the debt and have fun farming. Don't be further in the hole than we already are.
My ultimate goal, without, I don't really say this, but my ultimate goal at the end of a couple meetings with a farm family is to get rid of every single excuse possible that would end up selling the farm.
Yeah.
Like, oh, there's not enough money for this. Well, let's take that back to, there is an option here with insurance. Make it so that it is comfortable and is a common goal that the farm is going to live on at least one more generation. Like, get rid of all the reasons why we should just quit farming. Because, like you said earlier, there's going to be two demographics in Canada that, if we continue on this trend, that are going to own all the land and control all the food supply.
Hmm.
And I don't think either one are good long term to rely on. So you don't want your kids being farm employees. You want them to own the farm and farm for themselves.
Yeah.
And I know thousands, not thousands, hundreds, maybe over 1,000. How many farm kids their parents or grandparents used to farm, and then they sell it and then they go work for the neighbor up the road? It'd be a lot more fun to farm for yourself, to keep what your family had intact and farm on your own.
Yeah.
You're doing the same amount of work anyway.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. I'm enjoying walking through this because I think we're at a time where we need different solutions. And I'm thinking that a lot of people don't even think about this.
Right. And that's my goal with these videos with you, is just to get out there. There's options.
Yeah.
You don't have to keep silent and be afraid to bring it up because you're afraid of ticking off your kids. Like, there are viable options that are provided by multi-billion-dollar companies with a contract that can help keep it all together.
Yeah. And that was another thing I think you mentioned in our previous episode. These are big, reputable companies, insurance companies.
Massive. You've heard of them.
Yeah, it's like the main ones. It's not that it's some secretive little company. Like, this is straight up, straight up.
Canada Life, Sun Life, Manulife, Equitable Life.
There you go.
Usually it's just the big ones that you see on the sides of buses and at the hockey arenas all over the place.
See, and I'm just having a good time naming all the fears and thoughts and concerns that everybody would have, because I'm thinking about all of these things, same as every farmer in the audience would be like, well, who are these companies?
Right. And one thing that does come up is, well, what if the government changes the tax rules? That does come up,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So insurance has been changed a few times in Canada. It's usually roughly every 30 years, but then those rules are all legislated and grandfathered in for whatever date that policy was sold. So if you bought a policy in 1978, it's going to have different rules than 1992 and different rules in 2018. And they haven't changed it since 2017, I believe. But it is all grandfathered in, so that at least you can plan for 40 years from now and you're not scrambling to try to change things when you're 90 years old, right? I'm trying to make things as boring as possible for the farmer, right? Financially, there's enough moving parts in their operation and dynamics with children and livestock and equipment and employees and all the other things going on. This should be a half hour a year conversation to review, and should lessen the anxiety and stress of the family, not add.
Yeah.
That is the ultimate goal.
I can see that. There's just, and I know as a business person with my media company and as a farmer, there's always just so much on our brains. And if you look at something and it's big and scary and you got to learn about it, then you avoid it, right? Because your brain's like, Mayday, I have enough. Let's not worry about this. Let's not worry about it. So that's kind of why I'm just pulling the Band-Aid off and trying to just not make it scary, right? Just talk it through. So it makes sense, because I've said it a few times, I don't think a lot of farmers think about this, and we're at a new time in the evolution of farming, society, inflation, commodity price, that we need new solutions. And if the farm founder says it's that important for their family farm to continue on, it is up to them to try and figure out these new solutions that's actually going to work, right? Because farm founders are in a rock and a hard place. And I'm not even going to say this is what I believe farm founders should do, but it was probably much easier when they say, Bobby Joe, the oldest son, gets a farm. We're done. That's acceptable.
There was a time you didn't want the farm and you got stuck on the farm,
Yeah. Well, there's
right?
that too. Yeah.
It was nothing but work when you still had 2 furrow plows and little 30-horse gas tractors and a team of horses on the farm.
Yeah.
You got stuck with the farm and you didn't make barely any money.
Right.
It was fashionable, and it was a privilege to be able to move to town and get an education and live in the city, right? You didn't want to stay in the middle of nowhere and do nothing but work.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that. Yeah. Well,
Now with technology and the values of everything, now it's you want to be the one that stays on the farm. I can quite confidently say that.
for the equity, but also there's a lot of risk and there's a lot of work, and non-farming kids don't see that either, right? They just think it's all glorious. It's like, go get your government job. Not saying I wouldn't do that, but there's pros and cons to each side, right?
There is a lot of risk and a lot of stress, but between marketing and programs and being business savvy, you can mitigate a lot of the risk. You can lock in interest rates. You can get to a certain level where you're buying swaps. You can book grain ahead. You can book cattle ahead. There's some savvy people out there that when everybody else is worried about making money, they're still making money.
Yeah, true. 2 more quick notes on that subject, and I think it merits saying, but back, like you said, there was a time when farming was kind of what you did. I know several people that are in that 80s. You know how they feel about farming, which I think is different from the next generation to the next. They said that's what the stupid kids did. The ones that didn't have an education, they got forced to carry on. Where I think a lot of us now, we're like, what a privilege. One, and then number 2, good secure jobs ain't so good and secure anymore like it was 10, 20, 30 years ago either, right? I made that mistake and said that jobs have security, and then I'm like, wait a minute, I took that back in my mouth that time. I'm taking it back right now because the job security ain't there either so much, but I digress. We're going on a rabbit trail or two, right? Right. Those are the best conversations though,
Yeah.
Darin.
Yeah, and that was going down the rabbit trail towards politics, and I've been trying to avoid that.
Oh, well, come on.
That's a whole nother call. That's 17
Yeah.
hours long.
We can end this and then we'll talk politics. It's harder and harder not to talk politics because of
It's crazy. What's
Mhm. It is very hard. Like when I first started this show, I mean, 8 years ago, not long ago, but it was easier. But now, as farmers, and I'll say this, and it's safe to say, one of our biggest threats as farmers is policy. And because it is such a risk and it's so in our face right now, it is almost hard not to talk politics. We won't be giving our colors or our teams away or ranting and raving, but hey, looping this around, while our biggest risks are markets, we can put things in place, interest, we can put things in place, hedging, all of that stuff. We have the government there that is risky, but heck, this episode speaks to one of the biggest ways to secure your operation for yourself, for the next generation, right? Like if you want to talk about taking risk away, an insurance policy sitting there is a nice little nest egg, right?
Yeah, it's a very nice nest egg. I know it's boring. It's long term, it's boring. Oh, look, it made 6% last year. What did we say it was going to make 6%? Right? It's not up and down 30% with the stock market and grain and cattle. And cattle is a whole nother call too. because I hope everybody's buying price insurance on their feeder cattle right now.
Yeah. We could have about 5 different conversations here. But on
Yeah.
the next episode of the Impact Farming Show. No, this has been good. I think there was only one other thing that you wanted to mention, and I think it's worth noting. You were talking about corporations and capital gains, and I can't even remember what your context was, but something struck me where if you're incorporated and you eventually do sell that farm, and let's say it gets divvied up to 4 kids, you still get taxed personally on dividends. Is that right? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, you're going to pay the capital gains for sure inside the corporation, but then you're going to also get taxed on a portion of it coming out of the corporation to the personal hands as well. So if the long-term goal is you have all this wealth in a corporation, whether it's farmland or investments or whatever it may be, you can use the insurance to take the money out of the corporation and give it to the next generation personally tax-free.
Mm,
And that's the only way to do it in entirety, because otherwise you're going to be taxed inside the corporation and then personally again. And that 10 million number in the corporation or whatever it may be is not going to equal that by the time you get it all into your personal hands.
yeah.
So and you can use it for both too. You can use it for the liquidity portion that we started the call on, but you still have that tax credit remaining after you've written those checks to the non-farming kids or to the bank to pay down debt or whatever. That capital dividend account remains in your financials, that your account can use that in the future so
Mm,
that you're not paying personal income tax on taking those elected dividends out.
okay.
That's huge too. There's a lot of value in having that sitting there as a credit.
Okay. I'm not going to get you to 101 that. I get that. I get that enough. And I think at the end of the day, I understand what you're saying. But for every farmer in the audience, whatever their situation is, if they want to pass on a family farm, here's the insurance way we can help. If you are looking at selling the farm, because Darin, not to be defeatist, but let's talk about it all. There may be farmers, if they're in an okay position, they're older, they've been through this all, they're looking at what's all going on. They might be like, let's cash this farm out. We don't want that. I want the farm to all stay. But I imagine somewhere in some tiny little corner in Canada, in the US, they're going, you know what? Let's get our wealth out of this farming industry because it's risky. We see this, we're concerned about this, and they want to get it to the kids. And then that's again where you're saying interest, insurance can help with that, right?
Right, for sure. Yeah, well, especially if you don't have anybody in the family that wants to farm.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Maybe everybody went to university and moved to the city and nobody wants to farm, which there's lots of those across the country too, which is fine. But yeah, you need to plan, especially when you're incorporated, that you need to start planning way ahead of time if you don't want your primary beneficiary to be the government of Canada.
Mm,
And if you're getting older and you don't have any kids that want to farm, it's not such a bad idea. Like if you took the value of your farm and went to a city and bought an apartment building of equal value, you could travel the world and make more money than you probably are farming this year without having to do anything,
yes.
right? You hire a management company and the money's deposited in your bank monthly.
Yeah.
Like, like there are other options and ways to make money in the world. Farming just seems to be the most enjoyable
Right.
and romantic out of all of them, right? Everybody wants to have a cattle ranch. Billionaires buy cattle ranches just so they can say they have them.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, I think I have covered every single question in this brain of mine, and I have loved this conversation. There's been other times where maybe on this subject, different subjects, I don't understand it enough. Maybe I don't ask enough questions, but I feel really comfortable. And again, everybody, it's the onus of the people in the audience. We have our disclaimer. Do our research. Sit down with somebody. Say, here's our deal. explain this to me, Darin. Explain it to me again, Darin. Again, Darin, and then
Yeah.
figure it out. Because again, if your money and your wealth and your farm is important to you, we need to figure out solutions that are like for today, not like 1920 strategy, right?
Yeah, very much so. We need to take all the high net worth planning from the financial institutions in the big cities and bring it out to the rural, to where the blood, sweat, and tears are being poured into these farms, and present them so that people know that they have options.
I like
That
it.
is my ultimate goal. And I'm not afraid. I'll go anywhere in Canada somebody wants to meet. My truck's 11 months old. It rolled over 100,000 kilometers today when I was on the way home from the gym. So one coffee is my fact-finding fee, and my solutions conversation is another cup of coffee. So I'm 2 cups of coffee total for a meeting charge.
Okay. I think I have covered it all. This has been a good, long, informative conversation. If you don't have anything else to add, I'll put your contact details on the show page. So if you're listening, watching, just go to Farm Marketer, Impact Farming, find this episode. At the bottom will be all Darin's contact information. Darin, anything else you want to leave the audience with?
No, give me a shout anytime. I'm in the truck all the time. Be happy to talk to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for spending your time here, Darin, and bearing with my 101 questions. I feel so
Thank you.
good. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Thanks.
I love it. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. You guys in the audience, if you like this as much as I did, like it, share it, and get it out there, because I have just said this like 2 minutes ago. If we want the family farm to continue on, we got to figure out options that work for the situation we're in right now, not what happened to our grandfather and great-grandfather. So like it, share it, get it out there, connect with Darin if you're interested, and we'll see you next week. Bye, guys.
You've been listening to Impact Farming. For more great episodes and articles designed to help you manage and grow your farming operation, head on over to farmmarketer.com. Don't forget to sign up while you're there. We will see you on the next episode.